On today's podcast episode, we're doing something a little different. Recently, we hosted a webinar featuring Ruth Ann Dailey, the Senior Vice President of Philanthropy at the American Cancer Society. Ruth Ann shared how ACS realized they needed to build a stronger major gift program if they were going to continue to grow in the future. Today, we're sharing a replay of that webinar. We hope it will inspire you to tackle whatever changes need to be made at your organization for you to create more authentic relationships with donors and achieve your organization's goals.
Welcome to the Nothing But Major Gifts podcast from Veritas Group, featuring Richard Perry and Jeff Schreifels. Twice a month, we bring you the latest and best thinking about major gift fundraising so you can develop authentic relationships with your major donors. Here are your hosts, Richard and Jeff.
Welcome to Veritas Group's webinar, How the American Cancer Society Doubled Their Major and Mid-Level Revenue in 3 Years. Today's webinar features Jeff Schreifels and Ruth Ann Dailey. Ruth Ann is the Senior Vice President of Philanthropy at the American Cancer Society and has been a key partner of ours in our work with the Society. We're so glad to have you both here. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for the introduction, Karen. And I cannot tell you how excited I am to be here with Ruth Ann to hear about ACS's transformation and what they've done with their major gift and mid-level fundraising. Now, as Karen was saying, this webinar is going to run a little differently than our typical webinar. And essentially, I'm going to be interviewing Ruth Ann, and we'll be discussing some of the major factors that have led ACS to double their major gift and mid-level revenue. So, Ruth Ann, are you ready to get started?
I'm ready.
All right. Why don't we start by kind of laying the context? In a sense, what was the problem you were trying to solve at American Cancer Society?
Yeah, the American Cancer Society, like so many other organizations like ours, really reliant on peer-to-peer event revenue, and for a long period of time. And so it was probably in 2008, 2009 that we started to work with consultants and discuss more about how we wanted to diversify our revenue. And we knew that individual giving and corporate opportunities, we really wanted to be more present in those spaces. And candidly, we had some stops and starts in the major gift space. And the way, I mean, I've been at ACS over 20 years, and the way that we've done major gifts historically is to just go look for rich people, you know, kind of sometimes all have the same rich person we were fighting over, you know? So I guess it was about 2018 that we really decided we want to be committed to changing our behavior in this space. And so we really wanted to do a level set and look at having our whole entire staff team have the same training, the same message, the same vernacular around major gift fundraising. And we talked to a lot of different partners, and that's how we got to Veritas.
Okay.
So that's really what started.
So what was that? How did you change that approach to major gifts then?
We started because, you're talking about like close to 100 years of transactional fundraising, right? Like we had raised a lot of money, continue to raise a lot of money in that space, and don't want to stop raising money in this space. We just want to add and significantly increase this relationship fundraising. So,
when you say transactional, you were saying we're just getting, people weren't necessarily committed necessarily to the mission. Maybe they were giving towards, someone asked them to, like a peer-to-peer, or they went to an event or a gala, but you didn't really establish those relationships with those donors.
No, we were definitely in it was not as personal and meaningful and that's not the case across the board, but for sure, and we know this just in kind of year over year revenue that you see in that peer-to-peer space. And
Yeah.
even in galas where you have a lot of high net worth individuals, a lot of that's predicated on the honoree and different things. So it's really hard to sustain and grow.
Yeah.
And, we had some really extraordinary years of Relay for Life, but it was just on a pretty significant decline, and we were not at the same time kind of doubling down on this space. So I think in 2018, we really knew we wanted to change what we were doing, but because we were so ingrained in this space, we also knew it wasn't going to just be like, oh, sounds great, let's just do this. So we wanted to kind of start with a pilot.
Okay.
And we looked at one area of the country, the Northeast area of the country, and we nationwide, everybody went through the training, but we took Northeast and we said, okay, we want to execute in 2018 all of the components of this extremely disciplined process. And I would say that was the difference, because what the Veritas model isn't, it's not extraordinary, right? It's you're consistently touching donors in a meaningful way,
Right.
but you hold fidelity to that. You must be disciplined.
Yeah.
And I think we would, reach out to donors, but if we didn't hear back after one time, two times, we just never kept that process going. So that totally changed when we committed to also not just going and looking for rich people and saying, okay, who's in our world? Because we had a lot of people in our world that were giving to some 10K plus, but we weren't making the investment of stewarding them and touching them, all of the touch points that we talk about. So we had a lot of success doing that in the Northeast region. And I think the year we did it, we probably, went from, I think, $4 to $8 million doing that just in the northeast part of our country. And so then in 2019, we strongly encouraged everyone across the country to buy into this program. Let's make one nationwide effort. And I would say the game changer was the assessment of our data.
Okay, so before we go into that part, so I just want to reiterate. So you started out with, you did some training of your major gift officers with Veritas, and you learned about this structure and how to go about it. And they started implementing these things and what they've learned, and you started to see some success. And so you're like, okay, this actually is something that's working. How do I bring it to the rest of the country? And that's where you did this assessment with us. So talk about that approach and then how you got people to buy into that.
Yeah, scaling is tough. I mean, I think that's one of the toughest things we do in our roles, in these national roles, is that you want to look for these opportunities that you can scale nationwide and have the greatest impact. And so after we had a successful year of doing this in the Northeast, we accepted the offer to assess our data, to take a look at all of our donor data and see where, what our attrition was, how we were doing in terms of year over year increases, all of those kinds of things. And it was, it was disturbing. We had really horrible attrition, and we were still securing new donors every year, but we were kind of just holding our own because we never took the time to steward the donors that we had in a given year. We'd lose them. And so it was kind of like this cycle. And we actually had Jeff join us for a nationwide meeting of all of our leaders across the country. And we went through this process and looked for champions. I did a ton of the way that we do stewardship with individuals. I did a ton of that level of stewardship internally to, identify other champions, talk about what the potential is, point out the examples of where we can be successful. And, also remind people that it's not either or, because I think people, a concern is that you're going to take away from the event side. You're not going to be, if you do that, it's just taking from one bucket and putting it in another. And that's not the intention, and that's not the result.
Yeah. I remember us sitting around that table in Atlanta and presenting that data that showed that value attrition, just donors and the revenue going away. And I think everyone was kind of nodding their head like they had this idea that, yeah, we are struggling, but they had no idea how much. And it was such an eye opener to see all that revenue go away. And it was like this initial start of like, oh my goodness, we've got to do something,
Yeah. And it's common sense. I mean, it's really best practice.
Yeah.
It's stewardship, but the one thing that I can't underscore enough is that it is being extremely disciplined. That you have to hold fidelity to the number of touches, the number of outreach. Like, you can't just kind of do it halfway.
Yeah.
And I think probably for a lot of years we did components of this process, but we were never all in.
Right.
Never unified across the nation, and maybe everybody was doing things just a little bit different. And so I feel like, and we had pockets of success in major gifts, particularly around capital campaigns. But again, we weren't sustaining those donors. We weren't continuing to bring them back, and it was like that touching them year in and year out. And it's really been, it's been a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. So how were you able to get buy-in from leadership and, both regionally and then up top? How did you because you basically said, hey, we need to bring in an outside consultant for, it was Veritas to come in and help, kind of co-manage these major gift officers, build this structure for them. How did you get that to work?
Well, I think first was proof of concept, because we definitely had the learnings from just piloting this in Northeast, which really helped us. I think also we talked to other folks that used the Veritas training, and I came to Veritas through another former colleague that was doing major gifts somewhere else. Did it, and then I asked to be hooked up with some of your current clients and talk to them. So we kind of did our homework, and we were able to talk about that, and kept going back to the data, kept going back to what the potential is, what we were losing, and also that this is a long game, that this isn't something that you're going to see, you do an event and you see what you raised that night, even potentially. So we had to kind of build in some of those expectations along the way, and really, I would candidly say, just be relentless about it.
Yeah. And so it opened up. So then we started that process. So why don't you talk a little bit about, we talk about it all the time, but what did you ask your major gift officers and mid-level officers to really do?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, I'm so glad you mentioned about mid-level, because we didn't have any kind of mid-level program at all.
Yeah.
We always had a successful, direct response program, but we in the major gifts team, we really had no interaction whatsoever with the direct response team. And so we changed all that, and we also, that started as a pilot too that we did in Northeast, where we said, we want to really be communicating with those $1,000 to $10,000 donors in a consistent way. Maybe not the same number of touches, maybe not the same kind of touches, because we want them to have a much larger portfolio. But it was just extraordinary what we saw by year end, just in terms of results. And I'm going to say the first year, it was like $750,000 just in the Northeast that we did with the mid-level program. And then the other thing is, as you're doing the mid-level program, you're identifying these gems, these folks that have been giving to ACS, some of them for over 20 years, like 3,500, 2,500, 3,500. And then you do some more digging and you find out, wow, they give $3,500 a year to 10 different charities, and last year they gave $100 million to XYZ charity. And so we found several gems that we were able to grow and move up to major gift fundraising. And so that year in 2019, when we all embraced it, we had we hired additional mid-level people in every region. So that was great. So we started with 6. Now, right now we have 17. Like that's how the program has been able to grow. And then the other thing I would say is that, you know, we had some major gift people who were here for a long time, you know, and had been successful, you know, with probably a smaller world of donors, but definitely successful and embedded in the markets. And I think there was, you know, there was hesitancy, you know, to move to this new way of donor outreach. And it wasn't that they weren't reaching out to donors. It's just, and then I can't underscore this enough, like, it's a lot of work. Now, you have to be, this is not a glamorous, you know, I walk in and I pick up that 7-figure check. You know, you're literally like doing that phone outreach, doing this personalized outreach, and we changed the entire way we do stewardship. We took a deep dive and said, okay, we do a great job of saying how great ACS is, and it's great, but let's talk about what are the needs that we have and what the impact we can make with an investment to ACS. And we kind of really changed the way we communicate. And we started I'm going to say it's YMID, it's an impact.
You made a difference.
You made a difference. And we had so many donors that personally said, oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I never had anybody do that for me before. Like the number of just anecdotal proactive outreach that received was just extraordinary. So, you know, and we were fortunate because, so that was all of 2019. We kind of set the stage, and we had some people that, you know, were pushing back. And the fact of the matter is, this is what we're doing.
So maybe we should talk a little bit about what we asked them to do. So they had to work with qualified donors. That was a big thing. So we had the whole, you know, we went through that whole process of qualifying with each of the major gift officers, which is a long process that you talked about. Like, it's hard work to figure out, does a donor want that relationship with us? We put a revenue goal to every one of those donors who were in a portfolio. Then they had a strategic plan attached to every one of those donors. We tiered the donors, and then they met with a coach every week. Basically, you know, where the coach is saying, did you do what you said you were going to do?
And strategize with them on, like, here's another way to touch them. Here's something else you could send. This is what someone tried in a different market or in a different area, or I've had people do this. It was just like really one-on-one. And I think that's a game changer. That level of accountability is a game changer. And I also feel like, you know, there's a misnomer people may have about organizations like ours. You know, universities, health systems, they've kind of cracked this code, right? But for ACS, we haven't been players in this philanthropy world. So when you came to ACS, there was no portfolio of 10K plus donors, like 150 10K plus donors. People would come and want to know where that was, and it's like it just didn't exist. And that's what we built. And so when I say that's so much work, that's what's so much work, because we started this really, you know, at a very ground level. And so now when you know, you have someone that leaves and someone else that comes in, we have a portfolio that we can give these folks that, you know, that of qualified donors that people can be working. You know, we didn't have that in a lot of markets. We had to build that from scratch. And so that was the pushback, because you're hiring these, you know, experienced fundraisers, and the expectation is we're going to, you know, they're going to get this portfolio of donors, and they are going to get it, but they're going to have to build it. And so we kind of had this is how we're doing it. Like we had to just kind of have a commitment top down. And we did have that commitment top down, and it also helped. I was I was the vice president for distinguished partnerships overseeing major gifts in the Northeast. So I was able to have some credibility among my peers and other leadership to create that support. And then, we kind of saw that success throughout 19 and 20, had an opportunity to now kind of drive this at a nationwide level. And so that's when I moved into the role I'm in now, overseeing this nationwide. Yeah. And, if you would have told me at the start of 20 that there'd be a pandemic, I could never imagine, but I'm so grateful that we made this commitment when we did, because we had such growth in this space in 2020, because literally like events stopped.
Yeah.
We had nothing. We had no events whatsoever, like virtual events, thank God, which was great. But we were able to reach out to our donors and tell our story. And first time in the history of the American Cancer Society, we weren't able to fund our research budget. And, we were able to raise an additional $30 million in 2020 for that effort by doubling down on all of this work that we did. And then we added more mid-level staff. And then, it kind of was just kind of grew from there.
Yeah.
And
That's amazing. I've been interested. Why did you, let's go back to you were talking about how you started a pilot. Why did you start that way rather than just try to bring the whole thing and start it?
Yeah. Well, I am a big fan of that. Like, I think it's a great way. Anytime you want to do something new that you hope to scale, I think it's really wise to test it. And I think you get a lot of learnings from it. And I think you get a lot of buy-in by having others that have done it. So I could point to and have other staff across the country, as they started to do it, talk to staff in the Northeast and say, oh, okay, this is a way to do it. And I think it also depends on your size. We're a large nationwide organization. And so I think it really helped us to be able to test it out, really.
Yeah, yeah. What were some of the challenges? I'm sure you mentioned kind of a little bit, so there was some pushback from some of the major gift officers. Now they have to be in this structure. They're not just out trying to find rich people. But what were some of the challenges, and then how did you work through that with the client experience leaders from Veritas to kind of work?
Yeah, I mean, and I also want to be honest, there's still challenges. There's still, I think this evolution of being a donor-centric organization is just that, it's an evolution. We have done development a specific way for many, many years, and it's been successful. And so to continue to evolve that, it's not all perfect, right? You're still working through a lot of those things. And I think, some of the pushback was the potential, movement of resources to another area, right? So if you're putting resources and efforts in this, is this going to hurt some of your events? Is this going to, are we taking the same donor and just, they used to give, so that was a lot of pushback. And honestly, we still struggle with that from an event perspective, because we have a lot of donors that are giving through events that are only going to give through events, and that's great, but they're also going to give a major gift. And I can tell you, and I can point to it with myself, I oversaw corporate and major gifts and distinguished events in the Northeast. And we would have these amazing events, and these company CEOs, their companies would be donating, $250,000. And clearly those CEOs were engaged with us. We had great relationships. They had personal means, but I didn't want us to ask them for a personal gift, because I didn't want to do anything to jeopardize our relationship with that company. And it was so short-sighted. And so now we find that we can have those conversations, and we can help people bridge those conversations. But I would say that was also a lot of pushback, because that wasn't how we operated.
Yeah.
it's still not like still we always, it's relationship first. You lead with relationship.
Yeah.
So whoever has the strongest relationship, and if they feel strongly about an ask or something, we defer to that. But I would say that was some big pushback that we had, and we still work through some of those things. And there are some folks that feel strongly about those things. So
Yeah. So let's go back for a sec. So you started with the pilot. Well, first of all, you started with a pilot of training. You had a pilot in the Northeast. You expanded that. Everyone adopted this structure that we talked about.
yeah,
The qualified donors, the caseloads built in, the strategy, the coaching, weekly coaching. So getting through challenges. And then, so what has been the result of this? I'm sure,
yeah.
the idea of like the revenue, of course, has doubled, but then also talk about the stories of the donor relationships too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been the most heartening, is that there's just so many situations where we have donors that circle back to the gift officers and say, I've been donating to ACS for almost 20 years. I never had anybody call me, or I've never had anybody, send me this specific information about, my mom's cancer. Thanks for doing that. And, all of these things that I think happened in select cases, we made standard practice.
Yeah.
And and every region did it, but some were slower to adopt, some were, it's like you're constantly kind of managing some of that. But I think there's no question, by 21, so now we're kind of, still in the pandemic, but we're definitely like kind of turning a corner. We just were doubled down. We were in a groove with it, and we were more centralized in how we viewed it and approached it. And so I was just looking at this because we raised $27 million, I think, in major gifts nationwide in 17, 18. And then we did 55 million last year.
That's
So
just
goal
fantastic.
is 66 million this year. And the thing about it that's so great about this process is we have a path to it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've had many years I've done goals that I'm like, that's a little bit of a wish there. I don't know, but this, we have a path to it. We can see how this can happen. And it's also, the other thing is, this is not a one-man show. Like, the thing about major gifts, and particularly as you get gifts that are higher and higher, you need a team of people on your mission team, on your, your communications team. Like, you need everybody to be together. And I think, so when you talk about the revenue being great, I think those are the changes that you're also alluding to, like the integration, the commitment to donor-centric fundraising, the culture shift, and at the very highest level. And now engaging our volunteers in that, and communicating in a much more cohesive way. And it's been really rewarding. It feels really good. It feels like, we're fundraisers, like we always worry,
Yeah.
It feels like we have a real path, a real process in place, and that feels.
And the other thing that I know has happened is you've had a lot more staff retention through this period.
I know. We have.
Which everyone is talking about. How do we retain people?
Yeah, we have had, and I meant to get the number before this, so when you send out that recording, I'll make sure that I give you our retention numbers. But we have had, staff remain committed. Well, you know what it is too, like success begets success, right? Like, I think when you see that and you see a path, like it inspires you more.
Yeah.
And so I think we're seeing a lot of that. And particularly, like, just in the mid-level space, it's just been so rewarding. And it's everything's predicated on talent. Like that's kind of my thing. Like you can have the process, but you have to have the right people in place. And we just have a really exceptional group of staff who really talented, committed to the mission, smart, forward thinking, and you have to just give them that whole latitude to just blossom.
Yeah. That's so good.
I'm going to jump in really quickly, Jeff.
Okay.
I've got some great questions coming in the chat box, so keep them coming. And one question to go back just a minute from Joe, and then maybe I didn't want to derail you there, Jeff, but back to the assessment, there is a question about, they've done assessments too, but why is this one different? How did this help you convince leadership that they should really listen to you? And tell more about some of their pushback and how that really helps. That's Joe's question.
I mean, in my view, and Jeff, you could jump in on this, it was the lens. I think we always looked at year over year revenue, right?
Yeah.
I think it was the lens that you look through, and also being able to point to, if we made these changes and could impact this level of attrition, what you could raise. And this, that was what the difference was.
Yeah, because if you just looked year over year, you would see some growth, not huge, but you weren't tanking, you know what I mean? But so you were level, but once you look at it by class year, and meaning when we looked at donors that came in 2014 that hit the 1,000 plus, and those same donors by 2018, what they were doing, you'd lost like between 60 and 75% of their value.
A lot. It was almost 50%. Yeah.
Yeah. In each year, it was like, so it was all these donors were coming in. The only reason you kept it going is new people kept coming in at that level and masking the behavior of those people that stopped giving or gave less. So if you were looking just at over year, you'd think, oh, we're doing okay. That's why the assessment was so eye-opening for everyone, because it's like, oh my gosh, I knew like we weren't doing great on retention, but wow, when you see it in the numbers and the millions of dollars that just kind of went away, it makes a huge impact. And then we were able to show that by region too, like each region. And that had
and that was great, because people were thinking, well, that's nationwide, but how's my region doing? Like,
right.
And it's like, it's across the board.
Right. Yeah. I think one thing that helped, and I look at it from a leadership perspective, and I know you won't say this, is that, you were able to be vulnerable with your own numbers too. It wasn't like, oh, we're so great in the Northeast, the Southwest, no, your numbers were just as bad, as the other numbers.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important, is to what I try to do is point out what I've learned.
Yeah.
Like what I've learned is that my protection of some of these corporate donors was short-sighted. What I've learned that is my year-over-year numbers weren't indicative of what my potential growth was if I changed my behaviors and retained some of those donors.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure that there'd be some people that are listening to the webinar, Ruth Ann, who are thinking, well, ACS is this huge nonprofit. I'm working with a small nonprofit, so I'm not sure how this has anything to do with me. And I want you to speak to that, because
and it's that's important. The thing about that's just so valuable here is that these tenets, this discipline and process, it really transcends any organization size and also any area. We're putting these tenets of stewardship and touch points into everything we do, onto the mission side, onto the planned giving side. We should be touching these donors and having these stewardship points and tracking these efforts across the board. And you could do that in an organization of 100 people or 2,000 people.
Yeah.
So it's very transferable, I would say that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I learned through this process is a lot of those touch points and those things that you do with your donors, I really employed those same things internally.
Yeah.
Like I had a group of folks that I was like regularly connecting with. Let me do a gut check. Let me show you what some of your, anecdotal results are. What are you, so I think like those are just great tenets of relationship building.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm at this nonprofit leadership conference right now in DC, and I've had so many people come up to me from different nonprofits saying, I heard about American Cancer Society. What did they do? How can we do it? I'm not kidding. I just walked into this room and all these people are hearing the buzz about what happened with American Cancer Society.
It's so funny because, and you had mentioned this in some earlier conversation we had, like you want to share it because you feel like, gosh, this is really a game changer. Like if you really embrace it and believe it and live it and don't make it just a moment in time or reactionary. Or, oh, this is what we're doing now, or this is a post-pandemic, like just really embedded across your organization. And it's not an either or, it's just a component of your whole portfolio.
Yeah.
And so, and I really, because one of the things Karen asked, like, what did you want to accomplish through this conversation today? And I think like for many, many years, like I've been a fundraiser for many years, and it took us a long time in this organization, and it's a work in progress, but to like solve for this, to really kind of crack the code about, what can major gift fundraising look like in our organization? How can it be successful? How can we hold people accountable to it? How can we see growth and build on that? And I just don't think it's exclusive to ACS. I think it would apply to, any size organization.
Yeah. So in all of this work that you've done, what do you think made the greatest difference for ACS to do this doubling of the revenue? What would you say?
Leadership support.
Yeah.
There's no question. We have not had, and we've done a lot of different like feasibility assessments, all sorts of things. And a lot of the things, like we were always, I think, reticent to move away from some of these like consistent, tried and true revenue strategies. And the thing is, we don't want to move away from them. This is in addition to them. And I feel like we are at this place, and I've got to think a lot of organizations like us are, where we know we need to diversify. We know that.
Right.
And so I think that the senior leadership has just been all in. And that's the difference. I think some of those stops and starts that we've had over the years, I just don't think there was the level of commitment that we have right now. And we had a new CEO start last June, and just her commitment to this, like her continued support. She came from a university setting. She knows about major gift fundraising. Like there's just so much support at the senior level. And I think that is a game changer.
Yeah. Great. Karen, would you have any questions? That was a good time for questions, I think.
Awesome. We do. We have a number of questions. We'll start with this one from Misha. How were you able to unite all of your chapters to organize your development strategy? It seems that creating a large donor portfolio across the country would be an immense undertaking. So talk a little bit about how you managed the bigger picture.
Well, the large donor portfolio, it's by person, right? So so you're talking about like maybe 40 major gift officers across the country, and each of them have a major gift portfolio of about 150 donors. And the way you do it is really through, it's a matrixed management approach, just like most organizations have. I oversee major gifts for the country, and then we have major gift people in each of our 6 regions. I know a lot of organizations have chapters or divisions or whatever it might be. Ours is 6 regions, and then within every region is a certain amount of markets. And you're not going to have nearly as many major gift officers as you're going to have event staff, right? So 40 people, and then we help them build the portfolio with Veritas. So that's another thing, is that we look through the donor file and then we sit down with Veritas and we kind of build that for them. And so that doesn't mean that they're not still like adding in folks that come in through area boards and other things, but we're going to kind of provide that at the start. So it does seem, I can understand why you would seem like, wow, that just seems insurmountable. But really, if you kind of just take it in chunks, it's pretty manageable.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were talking yesterday, Ruth Ann, about the ROI of major gifts. So when some leaders are like, talk about that number, that was kind of cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're second only to Planned Giving in return on investment. We have, you know, with like 70 people across the country that work on major gifts, and we're going to raise $66 million this year. Like, it's a good ROI when you look at, you know, and like, frankly, we had like 52 people raising $55 million last year. So it's definitely, it's a great way to demonstrate value and bring more money to your mission.
Yeah.
Thank you. Laura says, thank you for sharing. How would this be different if the organization had a broader scope of donors with a broad cross-section of interest, maybe United Way or a community foundation?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we do have a broad cross-section of interest, because you think about ACS, we, you know, we're not just disease specific, it's any type of cancer. And we also, we do cancer research, but we also provide direct patient support and services. We provide lodging to cancer patients and their families. We provide transportation to treatment. We fund second only to the federal government in cancer research funding. And that's, and we also have a really significant investment in health equity. So it is a very diverse way for people to get involved and to different areas of the mission to care about, which I love, because then when you're talking to folks, you get to what that is. What is the most meaningful thing for them? So, you know, I think United Way, I mean, because you have those buckets of things that you're, so you should be able to, you know, pretty much drive it through those areas.
Thank you. Another sort of bigger picture piece. I know there's a lot of questions here that are more technical about how you do some of the mid-level major gifts, and we'll get to those. This is from Dee Parnes. Would love to hear more. Have you really defined the key to success being support from senior leadership? What specifically did they do to provide support? Define support. Great
Yeah,
question.
that's a great question. Well, one is resources. We were able to staff, you know, provide staffing support, provide additional staff to do mid-level fundraising, provide staff to manage, to do additional prospect research, you know, make an investment in me and a team that I'm leading nationwide to organize this nation, to organize this across the country. And also their words that they have, the, you know, they stand up in national meetings, on national calls and national webinars, and talk about the commitment that we have in this space and the concept of one ACS, and really a culture that's donor centric and donor first. And you know, and just think about, like, is that happening at your organization? You know, and that's something that you have to, that you know.
Thank you. Kate says, in an organization that's very broad and nationwide, how do you balance being donor centric while maintaining budget needs for organizational priorities and programs?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely work very closely with finance. I would say that we have what we have is a integrated finance and strategic plan, so that the priorities that we're funding are aligned with what our budgeting is. And so if we do budget relieving fundraising, or if we do fundraising that's for special programming, it's all aligned. But this kind of fundraising cannot be all unrestricted.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have some questions, and Jeff, maybe you start with this. Talk a little bit about the system and structures that are different in mid-level versus major gifts. Like, do you qualify in mid-level or major?
Yeah.
Compare
I
those
think
outside case, all that.
So no, the major difference is the caseload sizes. So in a major gift, no more than 150 donors. In mid-level, anywhere between 500 and 700 or so is what we found the sweet spot. And then in qualifying, you don't qualify the donor into the portfolio. They get qualified based on their giving level, and then we tier those donors, and then over time we find out, do they want the extra added attention, and if they don't, they're put back into the direct response program. Or if they do, we're trying to develop a relationship and eventually move them out of mid-level into major gifts, and hopefully they'll be qualified to go into major gifts. That's the idea, is that major gifts would no longer have to qualify because mid-level is bringing them those donors on a consistent and constant basis.
Thank you. I have a question here. We talked about how you piloted things, and that was really a great way to start. First, you piloted just coming to our Veritas Group Academy and getting the training and seeing what that system and structure is. And then you had coaches work with folks, on a weekly basis and saw the difference that made. Got a question here from Nicole. Can you speak more about the mid-level pilot? How many FTEs did you have? How did you collaborate with direct mail? What were the metrics? Talk a little bit about that.
That's a great question. So we had one FTE that we piloted with, and before we even started the program, we connected with our senior vice president for direct response and talked to her about what we wanted to do. And we just built a really strong relationship there. And we are completely in sync. And I would say that, we did it with one person and we were able to see the results. And then we actually just had 4 other regions came on board in 2019. So there were 5, and I think there was like some hesitancy still that you're working through, and with kind of across the board. And then you saw the results of some of that. And then you're able to move some of these donors, kind of as Jeff described, up through to major gifts. And then we got the final region to join us at the start of 20. And then the minute that the pandemic, I would say by April, we doubled the number of mid-level people, because we were like, you know what? We're not going to be doing these events. We want to be touching all of these donors. We want to be sharing with them what our situation is. We want to be checking in on them, like all of those things. Because the best part, and I often remind other folks of this, you're not asking for a gift from these folks but once a year, typically, right? So this isn't just asking, this is not a direct response program mid-level. This is really, even though it's a huge caseload, you're building relationships. And we have examples of that are just extraordinary. Folks that literally, we're just giving $1,000 a year, that just after outreach turned it to $1,000 a month. And then after you've been touching them more, it's $50,000. And then before you know it, they make a pledge for Hope Lodge. Like it definitely, it's just that it doesn't happen in a 6-month period sometimes, or a 12-month period. So you have to make that investment. And I think the idea of doing that pilot, even though it was just one person doing mid-level, you could point to, wow, the year before, this is what those donors did. And now this is what they did just in terms of touching them throughout the year. Mm-hmm. And so you could demonstrate that to folks. And so it didn't start huge. I mean, we had 5 staff, I think, doing major gifts in Northeast when we did the pilot, and 1 mid-level person. So this wasn't a huge group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So you've talked a lot about touch points and how you're doing that, through the years, but creating a really consistent where you're getting back to folks around their interest and passions. So I've got a question here from Kelsey. What tools does your team use to talk about needs with donors, specifically mid-level? Like, how did you build that portfolio of touch points around different topics? Like, how did that happen?
So we have just a stewardship team that is looking throughout the year, and at different months, there's colon cancer awareness month or whatever it might be. So we have touch points related to that, and then all of our priorities. And some of them are, like they're not just like one pagers. Some of them we'll take something off of a video and we'll send that, or we'll take a screenshot of something from Facebook or Instagram and we'll send that. They're all customizable. Sometimes it's something really clever and we're going to send something in the mail, and we just, you're just getting to know them, and you have to have like a kind of a toolkit, a whole entire I think it might even be called a toolkit of resources, different things that you could use to touch your donors and message them. And I do it. There's like a group of donors that I connect with every month, and I go into the database and I look for different things and I send them. Sometimes it's a picture, and sometimes honestly, I'm just like, hey, how was your cruise last month? Like, has nothing to do with the American Cancer Society. Like, I'm building relationships with these people, and some of these donors, it's been like years now that I've known them. And so it's about your kids and all other things, and it just kind of organically moves.
Wonderful. So in our mid-level, we have a onboarding process that's a bunch of touch points, not to qualify, but to really get to know your donors. In the major gifts, we have a 7-step qualifying to see if they want to talk back to you before they go on a caseload. And Jeff, there's a question about how many touch points do you do with mid-level versus major gift donors throughout the year?
Well, again, with mid-level, just so you know, we don't take them out of the direct mail stream. So this is on top of what they're already getting in the direct response program. And I would say it's somewhere between 6 to 8 touches in addition to what they're doing in the mail or email, however the direct response program is working with that donor. And then, there is a solicitation as well. So there's definitely, we definitely do not separate ourselves from the direct response program. It's all integrated. So it's an enhancement of that with a real person trying to develop relationships.
And I would say we were really fortunate because the person who leads our direct response program came from an organization that had a very robust major gift program within their direct response program. And Jeff is spot on. And it's one of the most questions that I get from the major gift folks. If I'm working with these folks, even at mid-level, why are we still sending direct response? And research shows it just adds to what we're doing. It just adds to it. It doesn't take away. And we make decisions for donors sometimes. And instead of having a donor make a decision, we'll pull someone out of something, and we don't want to do that.
Yep.
So Ruth Ann, we've got a question anonymously asked here. Talk a little bit about resistance. We talked about leadership, but what about resistance from fundraisers who are like, I've kind of gotten to go out there and do what I want, and now you're keeping me accountable. You've got a system and structure. How did you deal with that pushback?
Yeah, I mean, very directly. I would say, like, I try to be as direct as possible, and reach out to the directors of some of those fundraisers and have those conversations, have one-on-one conversations, and some people embraced it more than other folks, and it continues to be a work in progress. But I mean, it's just very direct and honest conversation. I think that's just the way to go. I think being really honest about what we want to accomplish, and and sometimes really just hearing what the concerns are. I think that and just building those strong internal relationships. And like, it's not perfect. Like, there's still things that, you know, we're working through. And I would say it's just a work in progress, because you make this kind of shift and it's not, everybody's not like, oh, Ruth Ann, that's a great idea. You know, let's just do it. I want to change everything I've been doing, you know, for years. Like, people, you know, it's a work in progress, and just demonstrating the results.
Thank you. A question from Michelle. How long did it take for the new fundraising strategies to be implemented and take place? Maybe look at mid-level and major gifts. So building the system and structure and then really seeing the impact takes about how long?
I mean, I think you're going to see an impact in 12 months. I think if you really put it in place, just because the way mid-level works and the consistency, if you're consistent with it, you'll see some level, some incremental level. But for us, I would say it was 2 years that we really saw the big hit. You know, you have to say, I will say, like, throwing the pandemic in there, that made it extraordinary, right? Like, what we didn't have a plan for the global pandemic, but that, in my lens, that's kind of how it worked for us.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you talked about, now you have a goal and you actually know your path to the goal versus, I hope we get there. So talk a little bit about, we have a question here from Leah. What metric coming from the qualified and committed prospects and donors are you using to set your annual revenue goal? So why do you know there's a path more now than before?
Well, for every single donor that's in a portfolio, you have a goal for them, like a financial goal. And so you can add it all up and then you can get to that. And then we also have some specific fundraisers in the foundation space. And we've really made a big investment in the work that we do in foundations, and actually using a lot of the same principles that we do here, because, you know, the thing about foundations is that they're donors, not maybe individuals, you know, private foundations, but there's certainly leaders there and decision makers that you're building relationships and using the same skills. So we also have, you know, those renewals and those growth opportunities. And so you look at all those portfolios, you look at all the portfolios of mid-level, all the portfolios of major gifts, and you're working off of 55 million, right? So then you're like, okay, and some you're not going to bring back, like some specific gifts that you know are for XYZ kind of restricted program. And then others, you know, that you're going to bring back plus, or, you know, you're going to have this many new, and then you can kind of work it from there. You know, it's a science and an art, I would say, doing some of this projections, but it's real, you know, they're real donors, and it's not just kind of wishful thinking. And I've had many of those years where I've done the wishful thinking.
Yeah.
So one last question, then let's wrap this up. This has been a great conversation. So Nicole's asking, Ruth Ann, what kind of infrastructure does ACS have in place to support NGOs across the country? Do you have operations staff working on proposals, stewardship, research? How'd you set it up?
Yeah, we do. So we, at the start of 2020, when I took on this national role, it came with some staff that we've grown, that are supporting folks from a donor operations perspective. So that includes like prospect research, portfolio building, it includes stewardship, it includes reporting, you know, all of those kinds of things to help the major gift officer and support them. We also have some principal support, some folks that are you know, senior level fundraisers that work and closely and help and join for asks, different things across the country with different NGOs. So I think that also helps a lot too. I mean, this is a team. Like, that's the one thing I always say, is that, you know, you're getting these gifts and you're bringing in you have to have an extremely strong relationship with your mission folks, because that's the story you're building, right? So that it's all of those things. But yeah, we've had those support systems in place, and they're really important. Now, we haven't always had that, right? We've built to that as we scaled this program.
Yeah.
So let's have Jeff share a few things, and then Ruth Ann, you can close us out with your final words of wisdom.
Oh my gosh.
I would say one of the most valuable things that ACS did to continue to make the case for changing their fundraising approach was having that data to back it up, going back to that assessment. And they did our free donor file assessment, and this provided them clear insight into the problem areas and where they needed to focus. And you can get this process started for your organization by heading to our URL on the screen, which can be found by going to our website and selecting resources, then free donor assessment. And if you're interested in learning more about how we can partner with nonprofit organizations of all sizes to help them grow their fundraising programs, strengthen relationships with donors, and drive more revenue to program, we'd love to connect with you. We offer a variety of consulting options to partner with your organization wherever you are in your journey. This includes mid-level fundraising, major gifts, plan giving, creating meaningful donor offers, and strategic planning and organizational development. So you can reach out to my colleague, Amy Chapman, to get that conversation started.
Thank you, Jeff. So Ruth Ann, final words.
I think the final word is that the future is bright. I think that we have so much opportunity in this space. I think as fundraisers, we find it so rewarding when we can identify that area that really excites and makes your donor passionate. And I think this is really a great tool to make that happen. And I feel fortunate that we have built a partnership with Jeff and Veritas and the team. I think it's been incredibly beneficial for ACS, and we've evolved, and as we've gotten better, we have less of their support, because that's the whole point, is that we're growing and able to do this. But I think the training is just so beneficial, and no matter who you are when you start in any kind of major gift space at our organization, we go through that because it's just a great level set for people. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me, LinkedIn, anything, if I can help you or answer any questions.
Thank you, Ruth Ann. Thank you for being with us today. And a big thank you to Jeff and Ruth Ann for sharing about your journey and all that's impacted the American Cancer Society. And just a reminder to all of you, you'll get a recording of this webinar in your email later today. So thank you all. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for the Nothing But Major Gifts podcast from Veritas Group. Richard and Jeff also write an ongoing blog that you can subscribe to for free at veritasgroup.com. Please join us again next time.